Because like I think there's a deeper conversation to be had here about reward systems, right? And you know, the framework that you've set out or that's been set out for you is there's hardwired more impactful reward systems in the entire, just in the procedure and the process of going through and qualifying, right? Like because the qualification is something that there's something that you lose out on if you don't do it, where there's nothing that you lose out on if you don't squat 500 pounds, right? Like, and this is where, and it's tough because I don't necessarily think competition needs to be for everyone. I mean, competition is a part of reward. It's what allows us to establish, you know, like hierarchies within certain class systems, and that's not bad. It drives progress. But I think you can always set, like you bought into a very rigid, well-established system of the qualification model that's just been around forever. But it was like kind of at the end of the day, like if you strip it all away, it's like it's all kind of made up, right? Yeah. Like it's all kind of just photons coming through the air at the end of the day. Like you can really dissect it down to as meaningful or as meaningless as the squat, as this conversation, as whatever. But I think everyone has the opportunity to find like, you know, to find the lemon in that situation, like to create a framework around, you know, reassuring success by really incentivizing that reward system, right? Like, because nutrition is hard for people. And you know what, like for me, honestly, the big thing that drove it was just pain. Like just how much physical pain I was in. Like I remember being with you in Sydney and like there were points where I'm like, I can't walk. Like, are you okay? I'm like, no, I am in searing pain. And it's like, fuck dude, this sucks. Like it's just, and that's what it took for me. And like, you know, I wasn't like the fattest guy in the world at 270 or whatever, but like, you know, that was the motivating factor. And I feel better in a deficit, even when I try to standardize for, you know, because I pulled heavy in competition, squatted heavy in competition. I've won a few competitions. I've traveled all over the world to compete in strength sports. And even though that I had those sanctioned things, like it's very similar to you, where I went to a place where there were other people, I did a thing, I qualified for a thing, I won a thing, I got a trophy. The reward system that I had built in my own brain to get out of pain was a far more potent reward system, even though that no one said anything. And I don't give a fuck. Like I've lost 30 pounds in the last 4 or 5 months, but it's like the reward system of, you know, I can actually push my training a little bit harder now and getting that every single day. So it's funny because we're coming at this from different angles of like, you know, what your reward system that you've built was around competition and around exclusivity and around kind of like, hey, look, I'm able to do what no one else is able to do. You know, when I was, you know, we were in very parallel places around the same time where you were ascending in CrossFit and Olympic lifting. You carried that along much further than I did. And then I was, you know, creeping up in the strength sport powerlifting world. But for me right now, like the reward system I built around not being in pain is way more rewarding, even though there's no trophies and there's no competition. But I think the proof of the concept that I want people to hear isn't like, oh, I should compete in something or I should get out of pain. It's like, no. You get to choose. Yeah. Like you get to choose the ultimate reward system that's going to help drive adherence. Because like there are times where it's like I've made this joke on the podcast 100 times because it's not a joke. It's like I could eat a cheesecake, and by the time I was done, my elbows would be screaming. Like that's how sub-threshold of searing pain I was in from a systemic inflammation standpoint. Like if you move the needle at all, if you hold on to another ounce of water, you're just going to be, and I would sit there and I would do it anyways. But after 2 days, like most meals, and you're in this right now, most meals at the end of it, I remember sitting outside of a sushi restaurant in Santana Row. It's not there anymore. It was tucked under Hotel Valencia. It was called Blowfish. Yeah. Hotel Valencia on Santana Row. I remember finishing dinner with a few people and like you know, outside of like a window, there's like a brick, sometimes a brick ledge that just comes out the length of a brick, and it's not really enough to like sit on, but you can kind of like lean on it a bit. I remember leaning against this brick ledge with both of my hands on my knees after going out to dinner with people. And this is like, I don't know, like friends of like friends or whatever, like people I should be making an impression on. And I'm sitting there just like heavy breathing, hands on the knees, like, oh, I think I'm going to throw up. I was like, dude, you went out to dinner with like 4 adults and you're sitting there like about to puke on your shoes. Like, get it together.
That's hilarious.
So, oh, dude, it was nuts. But again, you can build your own reward system. And it's fuck, dude, the number of times I've said it about framing your problems properly.
Yeah.
And that's how you solve your problems. Like now it's like, I'm so driven by the reward system that I got to choose.
Yeah.
It's like, then fucking just choose the right reward system that's going to keep you adherent, right? Because I know you're in one, right? Like I know that what you're going through is like, dude, you just want like a salad and a walk where your legs don't chafe. Like that's kind of where you're at, right? Like,
yeah, dude.
Oh man.
Yeah, I know. I have new aches and pains every day when I just move my body. Like getting off the couch when we finish this podcast, it's going to take a bit of motivation. It's going to take a bit. But I think something that the average person doesn't do well, and I think it's out of ignorance and in an innocent way. It's like, why would you know this shit unless you spend your life learning this shit? But I think a big part of being successful in that way comes from accurately calibrating expectations around the inputs that are going into the system and the outputs that are coming out of it, right? Like something I encounter almost on a daily fucking basis is people who are putting themselves in the position you're in right now. They're in a caloric deficit, but they still have performance goals and they still have maybe strength goals that they're looking to accomplish, even though the input into that system, which the input is less calories, so the output's going to be less available energy, it puts you in a position where you're not setting yourself up for success if those goals don't align with your expectations of the inputs that you're listening, that you're choosing to put into the system. And I think that's an important message that needs to be out there is like, look, there's pretty well established guidelines to this stuff, especially when it comes to like calories in, calories out, and like input, output in terms of physical capacity, right? Like it's everyone wants to be leaner, they want to look good, they want to be stronger, they want to move faster, and they want it all right now. But that's not realistic. Like you can't do all of those things at the same time. There's specific things, and this stuff has to happen. Like going back to a point that you brought up earlier is like phase potentiation, or there's phases that are going to allow you to be successful in each one of these specific goals. If you have the proper input, it's going to give you the output that you want. But you can't have the input of, I want to be smaller, I want there to be less of me, but at the same time, I want to choose what parts there's less of me and choose which parts there's more of me and choose the way that I'm able to perform in the gym. Like it's just not realistic. Like someone that goes into body composition or performance goals with those sorts of expectations, they're setting themselves up for failure. There's literally no way you can have success in that. And that's a conversation I find myself having so often, so often, especially because a lot of what I do, it's in either rehab or performance. I don't deal much with body composition goals, but these things typically, they run parallel. Is that people that have performance goals, people that are rehabbing to do something meaningful, there's typically a body composition goal they have that runs parallel to that. And the harder conversation to have is like, okay, I understand that that's what you want to do, but that's improbable right now. Or we can't really do that right now. We have to do this first and then eventually we can get there. So I guess where I'm leading with this is my question for you, since you are in a deficit, you've lost 30 pounds, like what does that look like in terms of performance in the gym, in terms of expectations, in terms of what modifications have you made to training because of the inputs that you have into the system? What are your expectations in terms of outputs?
Yeah, again, it's reframing, right? Like you want to talk about environment. When I started this process, and then I know, and here's the crazy part. When you start to understand yourself a little bit, like whether it's psychologically, whether it's physiologically. And part of understanding, and this is key, part of understanding yourself physiologically is understanding physiology.